I'll check with people online. Oh, thank you.
Alrighty, good evening. Ooh, there's a little bit of an echo. Welcome to the Monday, February 3rd work session of the City Council. Let's start with roll call, please.
Certainly, Mayor. Ms. Connolly?
Here.
Ms. Flynn?
Here.
Ms. Hiscott?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here virtually.
Underhill?
Here.
Mayor Hardy?
Here.
My name wasn't called.
Ms. Downs?
Yes, here. Thanks.
See what happens when I just follow my written notes.
And then we have electronic participation motions for Mr. Snyder and Ms. Hiscott. Who wants to go first?
I can, okay. Ms. Shantz Hiscott, can you please identify your remote location and reason for participation by electronic means?
Yes, I'm in Tubac, Arizona on personal travel.
I move that City Council approve electronic participation by Deborah Shantz Hiscott for this meeting for personal reasons pursuant to the City Council's adopted policy.
We have a second?
Second.
Downs on the second. Roll call, please.
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Ms. Downs?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Thank you, Council.
And Mr. Snyder, could you identify your remote location and reason for participation by electronic means?
Yes, Warsaw, Poland on a medical mission with Ukraine refugees.
And I move that City Council approve electronic participation by David Snyder in this meeting for personal reasons pursuant to the City Council's adopted policy.
You have a second?
Second.
Connolly in the second. Roll call, please.
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Ms. Downs?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Thank you, Council.
Well, before we
Thank
jump.
you.
Welcome. So before we jump into our agenda, I wanted to do a couple things. First, I wanted to take a moment of silence for the tragic crash that happened at DCA last week. Join me in that. Thank you. I think it goes without saying that we certainly grieve for the families and friends of all the victims. But given that we have so many public safety folks in the audience, I want to also give special thanks to all the first responders who've responded across the region. I think it really just highlights the importance of collaboration between all levels of government and across the region. So thank you on behalf of Council. Congressman Beyer also is holding a candlelight vigil Wednesday evening at Rivergate City Park in Alexandria at 5:30. So he wants to be sure to let Northern Virginia know that he was holding the event. And then the other thing I want to make sure is, obviously it's been a really chaotic and really tough week, especially for our most vulnerable residents, including our federal workers being under attack. And so I wanted to take the time before we jump into our meeting, really emphasize that Falls Church remains being committed to being a welcoming place for all of our residents. We want to make sure that people feel supported, respected, and valued. And we are, at the end of the day, a community where all are welcome. I think we take our responsibility very seriously to comply with federal and state laws. I think as members of City Council, we all swore an oath to the Constitution to uphold that. So we do take that seriously. But we also remain committed to uphold the civil rights of everybody, and especially appreciate public safety. So those in our police department and the sheriff's department to carry out your duties with both dignity and integrity, and really serving everyone equally, regardless of your immigration status. So I just want to say that. So I think at the end of the day, we cherish the diversity and the strength of our community, from our schools to our businesses, to everyone that works in city government. So we appreciate maintaining our values during all these tough times. And then the last thing I was going to say is, if we end before 10, maybe we can get our agenda review in and not have a Wednesday meeting. So let's aim for that.
Second.
Great. Anything else before we jump in?
If I could just make a logistical announcement, the room ceiling mics are not on this evening to reduce echo on Teams, so just a reminder to use your desk microphones, and we do have 4 available for staff, 5, if we have any other staff that need to come up to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Wyatt, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor Hardy, and thank you for your comments tonight. We have 3 items for discussion with the City Council, and then a review of consent items as listed on the agenda. We do, in terms of staff sort of thinking about the timing of the meeting, we have laid things out where we think we can be done by 8:45. And so we'll certainly try to do our part to hit those timelines. First on the agenda is a discussion about an ordinance to amend the Code of City of Falls Church with respect to hunting. And this is in response to complaints that the city has received about hunting activity occurring in the city, and our police observing that they don't have provisions in the city code to address that. The city attorney's executive assistant, Maria Rojas, did the research on this and did the work with the police department on this. And she'll give the report tonight. We're also joined here by Lieutenant Reynolds, I beg your pardon. Lieutenant Reynolds, thank you, sir. And we also are here with our animal control officer, Jimmy Overholtz. Glad to have him here. And of course, we have police command staff in the room as well. But I'll turn it over to Ms. Rojas for the hunting ordinance presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Shields. Good evening, Madam Mayor. Good evening, members of council. I'm here to present the proposed ordinance for unlawful hunting in the city. Currently, the City of Falls Church does not have any regulations addressing hunting or trapping within the city limits, which creates potential liability and public safety concerns. Although it doesn't happen often, it does prevent a serious risk, which is why we are bringing this item to you tonight. The City of Falls Church may, by ordinance, prevent hunting with firearms or other weapons within 1/2 mile of any area in the city and or within the municipal city boundaries. It is our proposal to, recommendation to prohibit hunting within the city boundaries according to Virginia Code 15.2-1113.1. With this particular ordinance, because the City of Falls Church is so densely populated, it does give us that ability to do so. With it being 2.2 square miles, having hunting activities in the city proposes a serious public safety risk, which is why the police department partnered with the city attorney's office to develop this proposed ordinance. That's it? We can take questions.
Great. Thank you. Welcome. Questions? Ms. Downs.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I thought this was very interesting. I didn't realize that that was the case, that residents in Foster City could hunt on their property. One question I had, I was looking at the example on the staff report. If you look at lines 59 through 65, there's a couple of examples of other cities. And let's see, there's also some wording about actually discharging firearms. So I didn't know if that would be something that we could include in our language.
So with this particular statute that we used, it's for the public safety within the space of the city. Those other municipalities have laws that, similar to ours, that prohibit firearm uses within public spaces. However, given that hunting is a right in Virginia, and state regulations say that you can hunt within private property, we took the approach of using this particular state code in order to prohibit the use of hunting within both public and private property. So that is specifically what we were using. That's why we went with this particular section in state code.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And just to emphasize what Maria was saying, we already have an ordinance that prohibits the discharge of the firearms in public
Right,
spaces.
of course.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Okay, seems straightforward. I guess I have one. So I support kind of updating our ordinance. But I guess while we have animal control here, I also hear equal kind of concerns about our deer population. And while this is more of a tangential issue, given that we're talking about hunting, do we have, other than what's in the staff report about calling the Department of Wildlife Resources, have there been staff discussions on joining up with kind of the regional effort on how to manage our deer population?
I mean, there have been minimal complaints or reports from civilians about deer, overpopulation of deer in the city. We obviously do have deer. Most people are very welcoming of the deer, and they enjoy seeing the deer. Obviously, they have concerns when deer are injured or such, but we have no evidence at this time that there's an overpopulation of deer in Falls Church. I know their neighboring jurisdictions have recently enacted, I don't know what to call it, like culling.
Like culling.
Right. But I don't think we're in a position where we need to be doing that in the city. We're not in a position right now where we are overpopulated. There are times where you see more deer in some areas more than others because it's maybe more open, and so they're more willing to graze in that area. But as of right now, there's no real need for us to get involved in that type of activity.
Maybe something to keep an eye on, since I know Fairfax County has a harvesting program, and then Arlington is starting their culling program this year. And so we'll be a little sanctuary for deer.
Right. So, so yeah, I've had conversations with AWLA, Animal Welfare League of Arlington, the animal control officers, and they were not in support of that program. They are in no way participating in that program. The animal control service is there. It's all handled by whatever entity that has taken over that concept in Arlington. Like I said, I don't think we're in a position right now. I mean, it's something to keep an eye on, of course. I have had one person in a little over a year and a half that has said to me that he thinks there's too many deer. But
Next time I'm going to forward them to you.
Yeah, okay.
For what it's worth, I definitely think the population is increasing. As anyone who's lived here for a long time, I was at my friend's house and they just walked in the middle of the day, just 6 of them right across the front yard. So, whereas before, I think, 10 years ago, it was like, oh, wow, there's a deer, and now they're quite. So, I think it is great to just keep an eye on it, because one of the things is, once they start running into the street and we have, God forbid, cars hitting them, and that gets, can be very dangerous. So we just kind of just gauge and see if we start getting more letters or if there's any kind of incident or anything.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for staff? Justine?
If somebody has rodents on their property, does this affect them in any way in terms of, I was looking through this, it says, trapping services, residents can use it, someone like the licensed professional. Would they still be able to trap or, set rodent control methods on their own property?
This ordinance is specific to trapping that would deal with weapons. Mm-hmm. So trapping and other type of mechanisms would not be covered under this particular ordinance, but it is with trapping with weapons.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. That was quick and easy. Thank you. Nice work.
Thank you.
So this will be in front of us as first reading in February, is that right? Later in February.
Yes, so the request is to schedule this for the upcoming meeting for first reading. So that would be at your next meeting, February 10th.
With the public hearings, looks like scheduled for February 24th.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, and so the next item, unlike this one, we do not have legislation drafted. This is for an open discussion just about a potential scope of work with amending the city's regulations with respect to towing. And I have been granted the short straw to provide the staff report for this item tonight, so I'll try to do at least half as good a job as Ms. Rojas just did. I've passed out a two-pager that I think will do two things. One, it will provide the City Council with a quick summary of what's on the books right now with respect to regulating towing activity. And then after that is a quick comparison of what the new authorities are that the General Assembly has approved as compared to our existing code. What we're talking about tonight is not when the police request a tow because there's been an accident or we're clearing streets for snow emergencies. Instead, this is towing from private lots. This is generally shopping centers, commercial establishments that are trying to maintain their parking spaces for the businesses that are in those commercial locations, or for apartment buildings who are trying to keep spaces free for the people who live in those apartment developments. So towing on private property. So the City Council has regulated this through the years, first in 1996, and then a series of amendments. The last time the City Council has taken this up was in 2016. One thing I'll note right up front is that the city has established a towing advisory board, and Lieutenant Reynolds is in the process of working with the city clerk. The City Council has made appointments to that towing advisory board, but they have not met for a number of years. And so we're getting that stood up so that depending on how this council discussion goes tonight, you'll have that board that prepared to provide you with recommendations. Even if the council's recommendations is to go slow or to maybe study this some more, the towing advisory board could be helpful in that, and also in dealing with any complaints that come up. So what's on the books right now? I've highlighted the text in yellow to try to hit some of the key points of how we regulate it today. One, it is lawful, as the ordinance makes it very clear, it is lawful for a private property owner to have cars towed off of their private property. The tow must be to a licensed garage and must be within 3 miles of the city limits. Prior to making a tow, notice must be given to the city police department, and that's to prevent somebody, a larceny occurring that the city's not aware of. The city has to be informed in advance. Item C states that the towing operator performing a tow shall obtain authorization from the owner, operator, or lessee of the property. And then it states further that that authorized agent may include the tow operator, him or herself. This was discussed back in 2010, some of these earlier amendments where the City Council considered having that second signature on a tow. And at the end of the day, Council, at the request of the business community specifically, requested that the business community be kind of kept out of it. And if they contract with a tow operator, that tow operator can authorize the removal of the vehicle from the property. Prior to the tow operator shall take a picture of the vehicle, and it shall be date stamped. Section D provides all the information that must be placed on the ticket. I did highlight one of them, which is the tickets. It states that the ticket must contain the contact information for the city police officials responsible for receiving complaints. One thing that, the city police, they're very interested in maintaining trust in the community across all their activities. Very often people don't trust the towing situation, and the police really do not like to be pulled into that private situation, which is between a commercial landlord and the operation of their lot. So that is one we might change to have the complaint come to the city generally, but maybe not necessarily directly to the police. It's something that we could discuss and think about. One thing that's required is that when you go to the garage, the licensed garage, the operator must prominently display what the maximum charges are. And we'll talk what those maximum charges are in just a moment, but those have to be posted. Signage on the lot, that's an important, it was a big part of the earlier regulations. And, you know, item 1 through 8 lays out what the requirements are of the private property owner to provide notice to the public that their vehicles might be towed. The drop fees. This is kind of a frequent area of complaint where someone might leave a lot, they come back onto the property and see their car is in the process of being towed. In that instance, if they come back before the vehicle is put onto the tow truck, no fee should be charged. If the vehicle has been connected to the truck, the drop fee should not be more than $25. Last few notes, getting to the fees. One, the tow operator must, I've highlighted the fact they must have at least one commonly used credit card where people can pay, along with cash and other methods. And then the fees are capped at $135, plus a $25 surcharge if the tow is at night, between 7 p.m. and 8 a.m. or on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, or a holiday. For storing the vehicle, the first 24 hours should be free, and then after 24 hours, the fee should not exceed $40. So that's the state of play in the city's ordinances today. A quick run through of new authorities. One, require towing operators to give 48 hours written notice to vehicle owners parked on multifamily property if the reason for the tow is that the vehicle has an expired registration or safety inspection sticker. That is not currently in our code, that 48-hour notice. Here, the second one is sort of the big one that gets discussed a lot regionally as people consider doing this. Require real-time written authorization in addition to an existing contract from the commercial property owner or their designee for each vehicle at the time of the tow during the normal operating hours. That is currently not in our code, as we just discussed. Require at least one photograph or video taken of the entire vehicle. We do have that photo requirement. This is a little bit different, so I'd say we're pretty close to what that authority is. Require receipts to include a telephone number or website available for customer complaints. Again, we have it's required that you list the police officer that's in charge of complaints. I think a more generic complaint inbox would probably be appropriate. Implement a permitting system for tow operators who conduct tows from private property. We need to understand that a little bit more. That needs some more research. And then they've authorized increasing the fees up to $150 per tow. And then the nighttime or holiday fee could go from 25 up to 30. I just listed those fees and we're at the lower amounts. And then the special fuel charge, that was, I believe, kind of a COVID era allowance that the General Assembly approved. That's not in our current code of that $20 surcharge that the tow operators could impose. So that's a quick summary. And we'll stop there to attempt to answer any questions or get council's direction on what, if anything, you'd like to take on as a potential amendments to our code.
One clarifying question before we get to questions. So all the new authority, this is permissive, meaning we may adopt these and that would give us more authority, but if we don't adopt them, then we can't do these things. It's not a must do.
That's correct, it's permissive.
Okay. Questions?
And just to reiterate, Arlington County decided against requiring the second signature, is that correct?
They studied it, they had it on the docket, and in October, I believe, or November, they chose not to proceed with that.
Okay.
They're doing some of the other ones. They're doing the permitting system, the 48 hours kind of grace period, some other things. So I tried to compare what elements they are adopting with what is here too.
And I guess while we're on that, I think the reasoning, as I understood it, was that they were, some council members were worried that it would become confrontational. Was that your take? Did you follow that conversation, or have you heard that in the past, that was what people were worried about, requiring that signature?
Well, I've just read the media accounts of the Arlington County discussion, and what was reported is that business community members expressed concern about being brought in the middle of a tow, and they were concerned about safety. When this was considered by the city council, I think the business community was expressing concerns about that, but also they were concerned, they just articulated their tenants' very strong desire that they manage their parking, that their tenants get very upset when they see a car parked there all day for someone who's not shopping in their stores, and they're trying to be, or apartment owners. And so the landlord's view is we have to be responsive to our tenants, and we don't want additional regulation that kind of hampers our ability to be responsive to our tenants. That was an argument or a point that was articulated to the city council.
One other thing that might be useful is so Northern Virginia actually has different towing regulations than the rest of Virginia. So Virginia Beach and everywhere else actually has second signature and has actually implemented signature years ago. Northern Virginia has always been hampered and actually had more restrictive towing ordinances. And I think the legislation that passed by Delegate Lopez, who we met in Richmond, gave us more authority to make us more reflective like the rest of Virginia. So other localities actually have had second signature for years and have not had issues with it, for what that's worth. I thought that was actually really important data point to point out.
And maybe this is just an observation that I would share. I think the motivation behind the second signature gets to the way that a lot of these contracts are written, where the property owners really outsource parking lot management to the tow operators. And there is a perception anyway that it runs as there's a very strong incentive to the tow operators then to tow as much as they possibly can, which means they enforce the regulations so strictly that people feel like that they were victimized by that. And that's where the phrase predatory towing comes from, is that dynamic that is set up through those contracts. And so the second signature is a way to kind of get straight at that structural issue, and I think that was the motivation behind the General Assembly's giving us that additional authority.
So, and does 100% of the fee go back to the towing operator?
Yes.
Okay, so the city doesn't receive anything?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, so you could see why the term predatory comes, because obviously the more that they tow, the more money they make. Well, if I could ask one other question. So on lines, it was just more of a clarification. I was, the first bullet line 17, when it talks about requiring towing operators to give 48 hours written notice to vehicle owners parked on multifamily property. Wanted some clarification on that. Like, what about, is that like an apartment building or?
So I confess, I was not aware that the tow operators could write tickets for that. That's just something that I had not been tuned into. And so I don't know if anyone else in the room can speak to that. One of the things that we have traditionally asked for as a voluntary concession in developments is to allow the commissioner of revenue or the commissioner's designee to go in and check for compliance with decal requirements and the taxes have been paid. We would never tow for that.
Yeah.
Our purpose is to be able to provide a warning ticket or then follow up with a ticket. So it's a little surprising that anybody would tow for that type of an offense. But I don't know, Captain Rao might have something more intelligent to say about that.
And if you could turn on the microphone, please.
First one is, I'm sorry? There we go. Eric's got me. A multi-family dwelling unit means more than one single-family dwelling unit located in a building, including townhomes. It does not include any lot with a development created pursuant to the Property Owners Association. Okay, so I don't think that the Virginia Code is going with, two families living at one house. That's what they're talking, that's kind of what they're referencing to. Apartment complexes can tow vehicles that have expired registration or expired inspection stickers. They're allowed to do that, okay? Madam Mayor, you asked if that first bullet item is a permissive okay, that is now part of the Virginia code, okay, the 48 hours notice. So that's not us setting up, allowing it in our ordinance. It's now actually Virginia code that
Even if we don't adopt it, they can do that.
they have to give 48 hours
Oh.
notice. Not the
makes
second
sense that-
signature, I'm just talking about the 48-hour
It makes
notice.
sense then to conform, if we're going bullet by bullet of the new authority, for that one to conform with state code then, since,
Do they not have to give 48 hours notice before?
No,
Is
they
that what
don't.
the change is, or they were not allowed to do this before?
Oh, no, they were allowed to do it. If someone, a resident of an apartment complex abandons their vehicle and doesn't keep it registered or inspected, then the apartment complex could have that vehicle towed.
So I'm getting it now. It's kind of more of a property management issue.
That's a property
You've got-
management
You've got
issue, not a
an
police
abandoned vehicle and you need to get
Right.
it off your property.
Right,
That's
right.
kind
It
of
would
how
be
that
similar
comes
to someone
delinquent in
abandoned.
getting your inspections, maybe
Right.
completely abandoned.
Yeah, but it'd be, I guess, similar if someone left a car on a residential street and left it there for months or something. They could, okay. Okay, that's very interesting. I didn't understand the way that it's worded. I wasn't clear on the multi-family. Thank you for that clarification.
Well, maybe it would make sense to go through bullet by bullet and we can tackle each one. So for that first one, sorry.
I just have two quick questions, which were just overarching when I was looking at this. So in the attachment, there were listings of 825 private property tows in calendar year 2024 versus 1,113 in calendar year 2023. So approximately, like a 25% reduction. And so do you have any insight into sort of why that number came down as much as it did, or, whether like there was a change in operator or change in contract or business, changed who they were contracting with in response to issues on their lots, or maybe not, but.
No, I wouldn't be aware of why the drop would be so significant, but, the one company that does run a lot of the city is Pete's Towing. Predominantly, that's where a lot of our complaints come from, where the CVS is at 134 West Broad Street. There's also a portion where I don't know if we could adopt, but the only requirement for these tow companies are to have double-sided signs on both sides of entry exits of the parking lot. The pavement that's marked that says reserved or permit parking only, that's not required. So that's just the property owner being nice and putting extra signage. So the main lot that causes a lot of issues, the CVS, because people will cross and go to Northside Social, and the tow truck driver sits, hides, sees them get out of the car. The moment they leave the lot, that car's picked up and it's gone. So that's where a lot of complaints come, because a lot of citizens that do not reside in the city, they call me and they say, I'll never come back to your businesses again. And they won't blame me, but they say, I had kids with me. I don't have time I can't go pick up my car now. I don't have car seats. So a lot of it, it might be also good if we adopt it where there has to be signage on the pavement that's legible, because that's where it comes into play of, well, I didn't see the signs coming in that says do not leave premise, where that lot there's like 10 public parking spots. There's some spots that are for CVS only. There's some spots for Dogwood, and people just get confused. So I think, I don't know why it dropped possibly 25%, but it's possible that people were following the rules a little bit better. I don't know.
No, that's helpful. And I think just your insights, obviously, in terms of where you hear about this most often, because, you don't want to kind of have an over-inclusive response by necessarily imposing more regulations or like a second signature requirement if the vast majority of issues that people encounter are in one particular place, and a second signature requirement, for example, ends up, creating kind of these possibilities for confrontation or pulling workers out into parking lots dealing with these situations. And then I guess my other question was just on this subsection H of the current code, do you hear from people as to whether this is an issue where, they come outside and the car or vehicle isn't yet hooked up and the towing companies are hooking up the car regardless, or if they are attached, but then the vehicle owner comes out that the tow companies are not dropping, the car and then charging only the reasonable fee. So again, is there kind of, you don't want anyone to kind of go through the experience if they were able to rectify the situation on site, but are we finding kind of on the back end that the companies are not actually complying with subsection H as well in terms of after the fact enforcement mechanism?
Right. Sometimes when there are arguments, police get called because of the argument. The citizen stands in front of their car and they're like, you're not hooking this car up. And so then they call the police. So we show up generally one way or another. That only happens, in my experience, a few times a year, if that. The tow companies have to follow one ordinance. And I was tracking them pretty closely to understand, there's many of these rules that you have to be able to accept, not just cash. It has to be credit card, many forms of payment. And then, a lot of it's always, he said, she said, or, oh, well, they told me cash only. I can't prove it. But a lot of times, yes, if the car is hooked up, but it's still on the property, then they have to drop it for $25. If it's not hooked up at all yet, they have to let them go. But I've never had complaints come in where it's like, no, they told me to get out of the way and took their car away. Because per our ordinance, while still on the property, that list of on letter D, the 1 through 7 or 1 through 10, they have to call it into our dispatch before leaving the lot. So they'll hook the car up, take their picture, and they're calling us to say, hey, I'm towing. So that way, if the citizen comes back and is like, my car got stolen, we have it on record that it was actually towed. So they're required to stay on the lot. So they do have to stay for a little bit of time and call in to make sure that the license plate returns to the VIN. Because if it doesn't, then we come out and we have to take the license plates and we tow the vehicle because possible stolen vehicle or whatever it may be. So I have run into a few issues where it was already taken back to the lot and we're like, those license plates don't match, so then they bring it back. So I have given warnings to these tow companies that if this happens again, I'm going to be citing you because it's pretty clear to just follow one ordinance. But, they're trying to make their money as fast as they can. Do they want a $25 drop fee or do they want their $155, to bring it back to their lot?
That's all helpful. Thank you.
Other general questions before we talk about the specific authority? Mary Beth?
So what is the current practice for how they notify the police? Do they call or they email or?
For complaints?
No, the tow company when we have to notify the police.
Yes,
prior
they call our dispatch. And so our dispatch runs the license plate, runs the VIN, makes sure everything comes back, and then they fill out a form in our computer system, so that way anyone in the United States, if they run the vehicle, it'll say vehicle stored, not so a different company or a different police department doesn't take a report for a stolen vehicle.
Got it.
So we enter it into our system immediately when they call us. So when that citizen, maybe the next morning they left their car, they call, hey, I was stolen. It's documented.
Okay. And then it says they have to be within 3 miles of the city boundary?
Yes.
Is there any sort of permitting to be allowed to tow within the city of Falls Church? Or can anyone who sets up a business within 3 miles do that?
I don't believe we don't have any lots in the city currently.
Right.
So
But does Pete's have to file some sort of business license to be able to tow within the city? Or if John sets up one next door, can he just start to tow, or does he have to have some sort of business license?
I wouldn't be able to answer that specifically. Okay. I don't want to lead you in the wrong direction. Okay. But generally like Pete's, because they don't have an impound lot, they have a contract with, say, Al's Towing, which is up by Merrifield, which is like 2.9 miles away. So they get a contract with them to be able to use X amount of spots on their lot.
Okay.
But we used to have one up on Gordon Road, and that was Pete's, and then I think Dixie Sheet Metal took it back over. So we don't have any impound lots in the city, but yes, they do have to tow within 3 miles.
Okay. But to your knowledge, there's not any
No.
permitting requirement to do that, okay. And then when we get into, I'd like to talk a little more about signage, but we can do that once we get into the new suggestions. Because I think that's one of those things that perhaps we could tighten up a little bit. And that is my last question for the old ones. I
had
have
a-
questions on the new ones.
Follow-up question to what Mary Beth asked. So when the towing company notifies the police, how long is that process? Because I guess I will say from a bystander's perspective, so anyone who sat at Northside has probably observed towing. For a while, I think it was once every hour or two, and then it's now more like once every 2 weeks I might see it happen. It seemed like it would go pretty quickly. So I'm kind of curious from the police perspective, when they call you and say, hey, I've got a tow, what's that turnaround time like?
So they call our dispatch, so they'd be better to answer that, but I would say they're only on the phone for 3-4 minutes. I mean, they're providing, they do this all day, so they provide information very quickly. They verify the last 6 digits of the VIN, and then our dispatch will tell that tow truck driver their badge number, and then they take off with the vehicle. So I mean, a lot of complaints come in that say, hey, my vehicle was I was only parked there for 10 minutes. How is it gone already?
Yeah.
So that's generally the complaint is 10 minutes from the time they leave to go get coffee and they're back and it's gone.
Yep. Does it have to go to dispatch? Do we think that's the best number to call? Because obviously you guys are handling emergencies as well.
Yeah, because they know it's not an emergency. So if our dispatch has to, they'll say, hey, can you please hold? I have other phone calls coming in, and the tow truck driver just has to wait. But yeah, generally they're only providing those 8-10 things of where it was towed from. They have to provide why it was towed from, or why it was towed from that lot, and then they're off the phone.
I guess something to think about is, do we have authority for it to call a different number? Again, I'm just sensitive knowing that dispatch is actually working really important things, right? And
Right.
I don't want them to be occupied with tow companies. If they have a different number they could call. I don't know whether we have authority for them to do that, but that's something, I guess, Sally, could they call a different number, notify the police a different way?
So I would have to look into that and get back to you, but I would consider it a non-emergency.
Okay. Other general questions before we jump into the authority part? Okay. So let's turn to either, I guess, the staff report or the other document. So the new authority we have. So the first one we talked about briefly, which is the 48 hours if you have expired registration or stickers. Sounds like that's not permissive. That's just actually what the state has adopted. And so it would make sense to make our local code conform with the state's, if I understood that correctly.
Yes, ma'am. The first one is a requirement. That's the state code now.
Okay. So even if we don't adopt it, they have to abide by that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that seems like one that we should adopt. People have,
Is there, when it says they have to give 48 hours written notice, is that, how do they do that? A letter? An email if they can't
put a little
find?
ticket on and say, I gave you
Or
a
is it
ticket.
just leave the ticket? Do you know what that means exactly?
So I would say, I mean, the police wouldn't be doing that because we're
Right.
not the ones asking for the tow. So I'm not sure what tow companies have come up with, like creating a sticker or something, because if we find an abandoned vehicle, police-wise, we have a big orange sticker that we put on their window.
Okay.
And it says, if this vehicle isn't moved in 10 days, it will be towed.
Got it.
So that's clear as day to see. I don't know, I mean, I see it says 48 hours, but what are the requirements? Can they put like a little sticky note and the person doesn't see it? I'm not sure what their requirements are, what their notice would be like.
Okay.
So if we do adopt this, I guess it would make sense maybe check in with our neighbors on what the procedures they might recommend for their tow operators are, and then adopt the same. Okay.
Makes sense.
Okay, the second one, second signature. Does it specify the second signature has to come from the property owner? Or could it be an agent of the property owner, just like how the towing company is an agent of the property owner, right?
Yeah, I don't think it has to be the actual property owner. I think it's just, it probably could even be property management. I think the issue people run into is tow companies seem to think that it's more dangerous for them the longer they have to stay on site, the more chance they have to interact with the citizen coming back to their car and getting into an argument. So I can see their side of it. And then property managers, it seems as if, then someone has to be there on site monitoring it when they prefer to let the tow company have full authority and they don't have to be on site and their lots are being taken care of.
Yeah. It was definitely a tricky one. I definitely see the perspective of wanting to balance, property owners' ability to keep their parking lots available for their tenants who obviously signed a lease for those spaces, right? As well as, the consumers, because I would say the predatory towing concerns, I would say is a top 5 issue I hear about Falls Church. Taxes, housing, transportation safety, but then towing is definitely in that top 5. And so it's definitely something I'm sure we all have heard about too. So it's a tricky balance. What are people's thoughts on this one?
Have we heard from any property owners about how they feel about this? Just other than your anecdotal conversations? Have you done any kind of polling or?
I haven't spoken to them about the second signature. I was tracking. I think Fairfax County denied it. Arlington, they might be revisiting it. But so far, in the Northern Virginia region, no one has passed this ordinance. Because there was a lot of, I think, lashing out from the property owners and the tow truck companies of saying, well, but now it's not safe for us. And so I get both sides of it. I just think, it's these property owners, the only thing I've really spoken to them about is, I told them you're not required, but maybe additional painting on the pavement just to show the people that do get towed, no, you were in fact, you drove over a sign that said reserved for this. And I told them it's not required, but a lot of property owners told me, they're still trying to recover from COVID, and they were advising to paint their parking lots. It could cost upwards of $70,000. So they were on board with wanting to paint, because the other parking lot we have issues with is the Scramble parking lot in Tower Square, because people aren't aware that Scramble is not a part of Tower Square. So the parking behind Tower Square, right behind like the ABC store and those other buildings, is Tower Square parking. They've done a pretty good job putting more signs up, but a lot of these families park there, bring their kids to Scramble, and their car's gone. So those are the 2 biggest complained areas. But I've spoken to both property owners, and they are on board of putting more signage up. I can't force them to, but they weren't opposed to it because they do want it to be fair. Because they also are the ones who receive the complaints, because a lot of these citizens don't understand who do we go to make sure that it was towed properly. And although even if it was towed properly, they still feel as if it was predatory because of how quickly their car got picked up.
Other thoughts?
Well, thank you for being here this evening. This is so helpful to have you here and hear firsthand. Yeah, I think I definitely see the perspective from someone getting towed having that second signature, but it does concern me, some of these stores don't have, they may just have one employee, and to have that employee leave their store to try to come out and then have this could be confrontational. I've seen people be very angry, and it could, get even just ratchet up the temperature, because now you've got the store owner and all that. So I'm thinking, maybe to your suggestion, maybe really having using a microscope to look at some of the signage. I know exactly that North Side Park, I park there all the time, and I know we have the green with the public parking and all that, but you're right, if you're coming in off Broad and you make a right into that, like where the back of the CVS, you don't always see those signs, they're right there, but you might just turn and not see that sign, so maybe that, I don't know, to me, I'm thinking maybe it's more of a focus on signage instead of doing that second signature, because I do worry a little bit about just, again, it becoming even more confrontational if we have that piece in there. But that's just what I'm thinking right now. But thank you again for joining us. It's been really helpful.
Dave, you have your hand up?
Yeah, yeah, thanks. I agree with the comments that were just made. I think this second signature requirement was intended to do something that I understand makes sense, but it also increases the likelihood of violent confrontations. So I think whether it's signage or whether we want to look at some sort of an electronic system that's more uses current technology in ways which we couldn't when these ordinances were first drafted. And I'm also sensitive to this, the 5-minute or 10-minute, particularly if it's unintentional situation. At the same time, definitely want to protect the rights of the property owners. I'm just thinking that parallel to this work on the ordinance, we really look at a more systematic way to communicate and really focus on the problems at hand and not be catching people who are making, the 10-minute innocent error. But on the other hand, we want to make it clear as we can, because the whole idea here is not to catch people. The whole idea is to prevent these circumstances from occurring. So is there a better way to do it? That would be my fundamental question going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Erin?
I just have one last one on second signature, and like everyone else so far seemingly tend to lean away from this one in favor of, more signage, looking at more comprehensive, parking plans, what we can be doing, as we've talked about with technology, of directing people to where public parking is and is available kind of more easily. But I could also see the second signature requirement potentially affecting, property owners adversely in terms of even negotiating like the contracts, if it turns out that they think that the towing companies think the wait times could increase, for example, are those contracts more expensive, or, if it's more of a hassle to tow in Falls Church, even though they're able to tow readily, versus like Fairfax or Arlington, where does it leave property owners contract-wise when they're looking for a term in a contract that's different than, what other people have negotiated. So, again, definitely want to address the issue for consumers, but also be mindful that, you don't want to penalize people for not reading signs, but, they also have to be aware of their surroundings and where they're parking given some of the circumstances.
I'll take the opposite point of view. I'm all for second signature. I think that when the tow truck comes in, they've already taken that picture and contacted the police before they even try to hook up, right? So they're doing all of that quietly. They could just as easily quietly get a second signature, and it would take 8 minutes to tow the car instead of 7. I feel like it seems like a red herring that there might be more disputes because there's, it just seems more consumer friendly, more shopper friendly, more walkable friendly. So and I've listened to many business owners and property owners talk about the fact that they need their parking, but it seems like they'll get it 2 minutes later if we require a second signature. And I think that is So I'm all in for a second signature, but I can see both sides of it.
Other thoughts? Any others?
Sorry, and this will get, we'll ultimately refer this out to the towing board for more input
And I'm
anyway,
guessing the chamber and the EDA
yeah,
will all
okay.
chime in, yes. Yes. Debbie?
Buddy, this is Debbie. Oh, you did see my hand. I just wanted to, basically what Aaron was just saying, I look forward to hearing what those on the towing and EDA and chamber, what their opinions are on how it impacts their business and all those things that Mary Beth cited in terms of walkability, access to their stores, and how it helps them or hurts them. So I haven't asked a whole lot of questions. I'm just listening and looking forward to getting feedback from those who are also, focused on this topic specifically and can give us more feedback as we move forward. Thanks.
Any final thought on this before I weigh in? So I'll be a +1 on the second signature. I think this is one that we've asked for more authority on, and now that we have it, I think we should explore it. If nothing else, I think it'll get people to the table, right? Because if we are exploring it, in my opinion, the better signage, better parking management is a both and. We should do that, and we should explore that, and that will certainly be motivation for people to do better signage and parking if they think that we have the threat of a second signature requirement. So I think it gets our property owners and the tow companies to the table to talk about how we can prevent towing in the first place, because ultimately that's what we want to get to. But we've been asking for this authority for so many years, and now that we have it, I do think that we should consider it. Okay, if that's somewhat helpful direction as we explore, do you want to get to the other bullet points too?
The others probably can go pretty quickly. With respect to the taking the picture, we already do that, but the towing advisory board could see if there needs to be any minor modifications to that language. The customer complaint process, I think we would like to just look at that and make sure that that's done in a sustainable way, and probably get the police out of the front line of those complaints. We'll talk with the police department about the best way to structure that, but we think we would have that conversation with the towing advisory board.
Quiet pause. Debbie, you still have your hand up. Did you have a question about that one or comment?
No, sorry, I just forgot to take it down.
Okay. Please continue. What?
As far as the permitting system, I don't know, Lieutenant Reynolds, if you've had any knowledge on that or anything. I would also note Becky Witzman is on this call. She often is the first to hear about complaints as well, and in the past has been active with the towing advisory board. So I just want to note that she's on this call as well. The permitting system, maybe we'll do some more research on that as we move forward with this.
If I may, that's a permissive section of the new code.
Okay. I believe Arlington was going to adopt that, so that's something that we probably should learn from our neighbors, whatever process they would implement, whether we can adopt something similar, especially if we have operators working in both jurisdictions. And the last year was increasing fees.
That's right. Is there any interest in the council in having there be a discussion about those?
No. I'm certainly not interested in making it more lucrative. Anyone else? So X is in the last two. As part of the second signature one, as I mentioned early on, given that the rest of Virginia already has a second signature requirement, I'd be interested in the experiences of those jurisdictions, right? Because if there is this fear of confrontation, we probably would have heard about it. So it would be helpful to hear from maybe a couple of communities that already have implemented or have implemented for years and what that's been like.
And
Can I
Mr.
ask
Snyder
about-
just raised his hand, just so you know.
Dave? You're muted, Dave.
With regard to the fees, I'd like to condition increase in fees on making sure that the towing companies are engaged in absolutely the best practices. Just throwing out one idea that they'd have to observe a car for more than 10 minutes before they tow. I know they don't want to do that, but something that removes the honest, unintentional, I literally crossed a line that I didn't know and I got caught. And in a very short period of time. And those circumstances, I suspect, I mean, you're going to get complaints when you tow a vehicle regardless, but is there a way to segment those so that we can remove some of these complaints but maintain effective control of the parking area on the part of the owners, so that we maybe a more in-depth review of what the complaints are, what are the scenarios, can we deal with some of those scenarios that are the most innocent, if you will, but maintaining the fundamental ability to remove vehicles when they're not, the people there aren't patronizing the businesses that have paid for the lots. So I'd be kind of interested in conditioning increased fees, and maybe even larger ones, if we are able to remove the scenarios that seem to be the most innocent in terms of time, that kind of thing. So I just add that as something for a little further work. And how have other jurisdictions dealt with similar towing issues? Is there an electronic approach? And finally, a question: by removing the police from the complaints process, if I'm an individual and my car is towed, I will literally walk out, and one of the things that can make a really bad day for you, particularly if you have kids with you, or even if not, is you walk out, your car in there. So the signs say at this point that they call the police, but we need a 24-hour line somewhere managed by somebody so that someone can know where their car is and it wasn't stolen and how they get it back. Is that currently a function now of the police, or how's that done? I come out, my car's gone. What do I do then? Do the signs say what I do then?
Yes, on the signs, there are requirements for the size of lettering, the size of the sign, and it is required to have our non-emergency number on there. So they'll have the the company's name and phone number on there, so they know where to find their car, and it also has the police non-emergency number. So they tend to call us first to make sure that their vehicle wasn't stolen, and once we confirm that it was towed, that's when they contact the company to find out where their address is, so that way they can go pick up their vehicle.
Yeah, I just want to make sure somehow that we deal with that circumstance. And I realize the burden it may place on police, but if we need to make sure that the tow companies then are operating 24 hours and that you're not put on hold for a long time or whatever, but that initial communication, we have to deal with people who quite unintentionally are caught up in this and frankly are quite scared. I mean, it's a very traumatic event for that. And so we need to be mindful about providing as much information as we can to prevent, then realize the more reasonable circumstances. But regardless, we need to make sure that people can know almost immediately that their car isn't stolen and where it is. And whether we maintain it in the police or another agency in the city, although I don't know what that would be, or we condition our fees on better, more responsive towing services if there are issues. But I am finally, I'm not going to say anything more tonight, but I am interested in looking at the scenarios of the various complaints and how we can more effectively, A, prevent, and then B, reasonable in our enforcement. Thanks.
Mary Beth.
On the authorize a fuel charge, are they allowed to charge a fuel charge?
Yes.
They are.
Yeah, that's in the new state code that they charge $20 for the fuel surcharge.
Okay, but it's not in our ordinance here.
Correct.
But because it's a state.
I have to look back at it. I believe it is in ours. In our ordinance, the only thing that you can't, you can only make 2 extra charges. So where the other 3 charges come from are after hours is $25,
Right.
holiday is $25, and weekends is $25. So if you were to get towed on a Saturday night, say midnight, that's where they'll tack on the $50, but they can't charge more than 2 extra charges. So if they only get 1, say the holiday one during the day, then they're going to tack on the fuel surcharge. So the max that they can charge is, I think it's $195. That's the extra, or $185 is the extra $50.
Got it. So I have a friend who got towed in December, and I think she got charged a bunch of things, extra things. What's the person's recourse for that?
Yeah, so if, now, I don't know how many people actually follow through with complaints. I
Yeah.
tend to get, recently they've slowed down, but I don't know, say maybe 1 or 2 a month maybe. I keep track of all the complaints that come in and keep them in a binder. And I follow up with them to make sure it was a proper tow. Sometimes, we can't prove if the tow truck driver did it intentionally or not, but I have found sometimes where they weren't supposed to get towed. That's only happened a few times, but it has occurred. Now, when a complaint comes in, they are required to give me a copy of the receipt of the tow. So on there, it'll list the charges. I've never seen them list over the amount that what they're supposed to for private property tows. So I've never run into that problem. They do have questions of, hey, why was I charged a fuel surcharge when the vehicle was towed 3 miles down the road?
Well, that's my question, is how do we justify that? It's,
Right.
at most, they have 3 miles into the city and 3 miles out, so
Right.
what's a tow truck on fuel? Can we, do we have to follow the state on that? Or is that something we have to lobby the state to change?
I'll have to look into, but I believe that it wasn't stated that July, that they can now charge the fee regardless.
Well, this says, line 31 here, it says effective until July 1st. Does that mean after July 1st?
You go back to not having a surcharge?
I don't know.
What's written there is correct, that was a time-limited thing because of the inflation and the fuel, sort of a post-COVID
Okay.
thing.
So it will expire
Yeah.
July 1st, whether we do anything or?
That's right.
Okay, well, that's good. All right, and then I really would like to put in a +1 or +2 for better signage, just ensure, it's been about 15 or 18 years since those original signs were created and mandated. When Letty first got on city council, she did a lot of encouraging that there was paint on parking spots, and that has really helped a lot. But I feel like there are some spots where signage would be better. Some property owners should not be allowed to tow unless they are properly signed, and maybe that's something we can write into the ordinance. That if you aren't properly signed, you really don't have the authority to tow.
Right. Yeah, I'm a little biased, I'm
Yeah.
a police officer, and I'm the one taking the complaints, so I can see the side of tow truck companies, like for the double signature. I can understand their safety. I understand why they would not want the double signature. It hurts their business, I get it. I understand property owners don't want the double signature because they don't want to pay attention to their lot 24/7. I get all the sides. I think just for my side of the double signature, I think the complaints would drop by 75% because vehicles would not be getting towed off the lot every hour, like Mayor said. So I think having the double signature would be great, but if we can't get to the double signature, at least maybe implementing in the ordinance of requiring more signage than just the 2 double-sided signs at every entry exit that says do not leave premise. A lot of people pull into a lot and they're not looking at that sign. I understand both sides of some people are distracted, and I think if there was just more signage, we'd have less issues with improper parking.
That's really great feedback. Thank you. And you know it better than we do, obviously. And then hearing back from the Towing Advisory Board and the EDA and all those, that will be really helpful. And, we could always give it a try. And if it doesn't, if it is not working well, we can always reverse.
Yeah.
But
And the EDO and EDA have also worked on new wayfinding signage and the painting and kind of making sure that as we add more public parking, there's a better map to kind of show people. I'm with Dave. I think there's some great technology out there on how to manage parking. I think 7 years ago, I talked about these magnetometers. I could tell people real time whether there's a car in a public parking space and be able to pull up an app and say, okay, I'm coming into Falls Church. Where's all the available public parking real time? We have public parking. We just need to get people there. And so I also believe at the end of the day, no one really wants to get towed. Everyone's trying to do the right thing. No one's trying to park illegally, right? So let's help people get to those spaces. So,
Mayor, I would
Yeah.
just add to that point, separate from the ordinance, the Falls Church Smart City Project, the third component we'll get to is parking, and so it would look at parking garages and public parking, and hopefully we can do some technology enhancement in that front. Traffic signals, adaptive lighting, then parking.
so 10 years later. Thank you. Any final comments on this one?
So will we vote on this next week as a first reading, or this is just?
So initiating resolutions are, first reading, no. This is just a scoping discussion. No language has been drafted. So next step is, I think our takeaway is that the council would like the Towing Advisory Board to look at all of these, essentially, and including the second signature. They will evaluate it, provide you with a recommendation. You'll hear from the EDA as well. And then with that in hand, we'll start drafting language after checking back in with the council. So this could take a couple months to go through that process.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant Reynolds. This was really helpful. Nice work.
All right. Thank you. Next up is Chambers artwork. And Holly Irwin is here. And so on this one, if the council is satisfied with the direction that we're going in, no action is required. If the council does have comments or feedback, we'll record those and relay those to the artists. And if the council has really strong opinions, then we'll have to evaluate that. But I think we're pretty excited about this project and how we're going. So Holly, let me turn it over to you. Thank you for your work on this.
Good evening, everyone. So today I am here to present an update on the Council Chambers Public Art Project, the portraits. And so in the staff report, we have sketches of both portraits that were created, one of Carol DeLong that was done by Deborah Kahn, and the other of Frederick Foote Jr. that was completed by Asia Anderson. Both artists got feedback from the families and descendants of both the Foote and DeLong family and incorporated those suggestions into the sketches that you're seeing tonight. I do want to note that just before this meeting, I did get feedback from Carol DeLong's family, and I have received and acknowledged those comments. They were mostly about how they would like to see more vibrant colors and integration difference between Carol DeLong's face and the background of the portrait. The artists will receive comments from the families as well as you all, and then those edits will be, of course, made into the final portraits. But I don't really have a whole lot to say on the matter, since I would love your all's thoughts and opinions on these two sketches.
Great. Thank you for your work on this. Comments? Mary Beth?
Thanks, Holly. How big will they be?
The same size as the current portraits. I measured them before the holidays, and I'm blanking on that right now, but I do have those measurements, but it's the same as all the other ones.
And will they have the frames that match the other ones?
Yes.
Because they're watercolor, are they behind glass? Are they
I'm currently working with Mike Guy to determine whether or not, I believe the two options are behind glass or mounted. I believe we're going to go with the former, though. But I'm not entirely sure yet. That hasn't been decided.
Okay. So I like them both. I like that Carol DeLong is in front of City Hall because she was involved in the addition onto City Hall, but I think it was the other wing, but she was involved in the addition onto City Hall. And I kind of agree with the family comment that her skin tone is very close to the City Hall color, so it'd be nice to change that. And I think this one of Freddie Foote is really nice, and yeah. One thing with Freddie Foote, it would be nice somehow to signify in there that he was a shop owner and a council member. That the shop is great, and I've seen both of the pictures that she's combining there, and I think that's wonderful. But if people come in and, well, I guess it doesn't matter. I take that back. I mean, you don't know that Thomas Jefferson, what he was, it's just his face. So, so I think this is very nice and well done, and that's all I got.
I think the scale of justice, while also being a scale of weighing stuff in the store, was to help symbolize that roles that he served.
Yeah, very nice.
And that's the reason why he's in council chambers. And so you could put a description of that somewhere as well, if it doesn't work into the art itself.
Yes, so I'm
Okay.
planning for each of the new portraits to do something similar with what we did with the utility boxes, yet with that sticker on the utility boxes isn't there yet, but have a QR code leading to a section of the city's website that describes a bit of the project as well as the artist's background and their thought process for the scope of this project, and go into like why they chose to make these specific changes and things like that.
That was great to hear the feedback from Carol's family. Have we heard any feedback from Mr. Foote's family about this?
So my original plan was to show them the sketches after this meeting tonight. Carol DeLong's family looked at the packet prior, so that's why I got those comments right before this meeting. But based off the feedback from you all, I will be sending, it's Ed and Nikki Henderson, who gave the comments for Asia Anderson. So I will also give them this concept and ask for their feedback as well.
Well, I just have to compliment, I don't know Ms. Anderson, but I just thought the amount of research and work she put into this was very, very impressive. And almost to the fact, like you'd like to, as an observer, to even read all that. I mean, I just found it fascinating. So kudos to her for putting in so much work. But thank you for this presentation. I think they're both great.
And I would like to point out that Deborah Kahn, when I saw what Asia sent me in terms of her description, Deborah Kahn also wanted me to convey that she's more of a spontaneous artist. So she does the research and things like that, but she said that she's more in the moment when it comes to some of the decisions and things that she does for her work. So every artist works differently.
Other comments?
I can go quickly. I appreciate the work on both of these, the artist's receptiveness to the comments thus far. I agree that sort of the change in setting from Cherry Hill and the farmhouse to the store, makes sense. And the same way with having Carol DeLong in front of City Hall. I defer to the family's comments, agree with sort of the, whether it's currently a little bit more muted than it should be ultimately. And again, just thank you for everyone kind of working together on this one and having the family input so that we're happy with the outcome. Thanks.
Checking online, I don't see comments there. Mary Beth.
I just like to add that today at Meridian High School, there was the Black Student Union did a panel discussion on representation in the community, the importance of representation. Asia Anderson was one of the panelists, and it was really powerful. And both of these are an example of the importance of representation in media. So I think that's great.
think it's very fitting that we're going to honor the first African-American and first female mayor, so thank you. Yeah, I think I echo the comments that I give deference to the families, and so as long as we are checking in with them for feedback as this continues, I'm cool with it. So thank you for your work.
Excellent. So the final step for this project, they have, I believe in the RFQ, the deadline we gave them was the end of May for them to complete the portraits. So tomorrow, most likely, I will compile all your comments, send them to the artists, and they will have between now and the end of May to complete said portrait. And then that's when it will physically go up on the wall. And I'm going to be working with Mike Guy on the location of where we're going to put those portraits. But I just wanted to kind of give you the rundown of essentially what to expect next. But I just want to confirm that, if I'm going to go to the families and get their comments, do you all, if they say something different than what you all are saying, would you rather me defer to their opinions and thoughts on the portrait, or you overrule what they say?
Thoughts?
I think since art is subjective, why don't we work with the family and see what the revised designs are, and then we can reassess if we need to come back to council, or we're sort of consistent in the direction, if that works.
That sounds good.
And I think we can also give you an update through the city manager on the location, because we have talked about how to blend them in there, and so we'll use the artist eye of Mike Guy to assist with that.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
And if you haven't seen in your inbox, Holly, I forwarded a public comment that we received about the importance of public art and people noticing it. That was a really nice, heartwarming message to get.
Also like how they were describing Germany too, and how they were comparing their little town in Germany to Falls Church, and I thought that was very sweet. So thank you for sending that.
All righty. Moving on to consent calendar. We're only 20 minutes behind. Pretty good.
Yeah, if we'd wrap this up quickly, we'll only be 5 minutes behind. So there are 4 items requested for the consent calendar at your next meeting, and I'll go through them really quickly. First is a resolution to adopt design build procurement procedures. One thing I will note on this, the school board has used design build for almost all of the school facilities that are built today. So it's a procurement that the city is used to. The general government typically does design bid build. And so we want to at least have the option to do more design build. However, the city council, one of the rules is the city council has to weigh in on that. If we're going to do a park project, let's say Fellows, or some project in the future, we would come to the council before we launched the design build process. We would have the council say, yeah, let's use that procurement method for this one. So that's that item. Paving and related services. This is just our annual paving contract. Capital Bike Share. This is to expand our Capital Bike Share network and pursuant to the Bike Master Plan. And then lastly, the Berman Park Playground Equipment. That playground equipment has gone through a vetting process with community through some town hall meetings that occurred over the summer. And now we've put out the procurement for it. And so this is to authorize that purchase.
Could we just see what the final plan was? So I joined that meeting last spring or summer.
Right.
And I think there were a couple options that were presented to the community, and it was very well attended. But it'd be great to circle back and say, here's what we're buying for $375,000.
We'll make sure that's in the packet. Yeah.
Great.
And I think that's actually coming up at the February Rec and Parks meeting, too.
Okay.
Quick question, Madam Mayor. The paving contract, I know that's been a subject of some interest in terms of increasing the amount that we're doing. Can you comment on that, City Manager? And then secondly, how we're doing in terms of filling some potholes that have appeared?
So we are out on, we have been doing some pothole work, just particularly right here at City Hall, but we'll also, we had led a contract to get the streets around City Hall repaved back in the fall. The contractor wasn't able to get to it, and then the cold weather came. But that work will be done, and so we look forward to that. What this does is do the full expenditures that the council has approved in your budget process. As we're putting together budget proposals for next fiscal year, one of the council directives in your adopted budget guidance was to provide additional resources for core infrastructure like paving. And so we're working to do that, and we'll present the council with some options on that on March 24th.
Thanks.
Questions, comments on the consent package?
I had one question. On the park playground equipment, is this just the purchase, or is this a purchase and installation?
Yeah, it's the full package.
Yeah,
Purchase and
okay.
installation.
Because, the installation piece wasn't clear on it
Okay.
in the packet, but I assumed that it included both, given the price of the purchase.
Right.
Okay.
And to follow up on Ms. Flint, and it's also the same company we use for Cherry Hill and Big Chimney, is that right?
I believe so. That's my memory. Yes.
Okay, because that's what I thought I read in there. So that just, I think that's good then if we have, had good success. And I was just a comment. I was amazed at the paving, the quotes, how all three of those quotes came in within just a couple $100s of each other. I thought that was pretty impressive. So I think that shows those three are good, legit companies. Thanks.
On the authorization for lift, I guess I should know this because we just approved the bike plan last week, but what are the locations of the expansion? Or can that be included in the staff report next week?
Yeah, we'll include that. That'll be an extract from the bike master plan, so those are going.
Okay. I noted they also do scooters, and while we haven't talked about micromobility in a while, not since pre-COVID, I know that Justine and others have expressed interest in revisiting that. So does this contract allow us to actually bring scooters under lift in town?
Let me follow up with Carrie and confirm or deny that. Or clarify that.
I know that people certainly have adopted a lot of private ones around the city, so even if there aren't public ones for rent, people zip all over the city with their own. Okay, any final questions on 4 items in consent? Okay. Well, let's get to schedule then.
Okay.
And then we can not have a Wednesday meeting. Does everyone pull that up, or can we get, there we go. Can we make it bigger, please?
All right, and to help me see, I've got it up on my own computer. So on the 10th, then, we will have a report on the co-responder program. And this is really just a report out on what we learned from that process. We'll consider next steps as sort of a next phase at a later date, and also potentially in the budget process. You'll be joined by the Retirement Board for the annual report. The hunting code that we just talked about earlier tonight, we'll have that for first reading, and then the consent items that we just discussed. We'll follow that with a work session on the parklet naming, and then request a closed session on worker visa policy to receive legal advice. So that's your next meeting. President's Day weekend, I think we are planning to keep that meeting being canceled, but in March, we are probably going to have that we will have 4 council meetings, so on March 17th, we'll start populating those agenda items. So the 24th, we'll be joined by the Volunteer Fire Department to celebrate their 100th anniversary. VDOT will be there on your Sharrow Avenue Bridge project. We'll give a report on strategic initiatives in the CIP, ask for action on the parklet names, second reading and public hearing on the hunting code, and a work session on the sewer capacity purchase agreement. We'll also ask council on the 24th to vote to defer accessory dwellings to April 14th. We could do that, to tell the truth, we could do that on the 10th. The council, I think, wanted to make that clear to the public as soon as possible, so we could actually schedule that for February 10th. Then looking ahead to March 3rd, affordable housing. So we'll talk about the affordable living policy. We'll talk about Virginia Village next steps, Arlington County judicial agreement. We'll also provide a briefing on the Arlington Fire Agreement. I think we'll be ready for that. And then potentially we'll have some draft language on the towing ordinance. That seems a little bit fast to me, knowing that we've got some conversations we need to have. And then a scoping discussion on tree canopy.
We said that March 10th meeting looked really heavy, so.
So I'm not going to go through the 10th. We need to kind of organize that. So rather than sort of do what we did last Wednesday, let me work with staff to spread that out a bit, and including on the 17th.
On the Browns hardware proclamation, is staff checking with the operators of Browns to make sure they can come? Or the family, or?
I don't know that we've gotten that confirmation, but that is the intent.
Okay.
Can I go back to one thing? Just because I had skimmed the Planning Commission packet for Wednesday. So when I saw the sewer capacity purchase agreement for the 24th, it reminded me, I know that the forced main to Arlington is part of the Quinn, site plan approval. That has to be covered, it has to be dealt with, right?
Yes.
In order for there to be site plan approval. But it did seem that there was still significant progress that needed to be made on the forced main issue, at least from my understanding of the staff report. And so given that this is so central not only to the site plan for Quinn, but to how this central city south of Broad pocket, is potentially going to be dealt with, or to move, demand or usage from there over to Arlington. Can we just get some updates worked into our city council schedule, just so that we can follow along, even if we're not taking action, and to the extent we actually do need to do something, or if it's within your authority to just update that agreement, or if it has been updated where Arlington said, yes, we can take that increased capacity, that you're just providing updates to us on where those things stand so that we have some insight and oversight of that.
So Arlington has formally notified us that yes, we can. We are doing still some analysis with some consulting help to assess kind of what makes the best business case for the City of Falls Church, as well as kind of the best engineering case. I know Mr. Young has been working on that. I don't know if you have any additional that you'd like to report in terms of the timing and kind of some of the questions that we're studying with consultants' help.
So I actually got a draft of several draft documents earlier this afternoon. Haven't had a chance to review them, but the intent is to kind of get concurrence across staff on the right decision for the city and document that both internally with some analysis, and then kind of provide Quinn with some written direction. Sally and I met with folks from Fairfax County last Wednesday, I believe, to go through the sewer agreement. And so we've sketched out an actual schedule at this point where we're in the game to bring that, or I guess to land that plane. I don't think we'll probably come to talk to you on the 24th, but we'll work this week on those dates to kind of get those into the council schedule. But I think we've got kind of all the details wrapped up, and now it's just drafting the legal document that both organizations have to agree to.
No, that all makes sense to me. It was just that the Arlington piece of it, at least, because it concerns city property and the whole, Fairfax, East Fairfax, extension and crossing Broad, and whether, whatever the forced main was being set up properly. I do think that it's not specific solely to the Quinn project, even though it's being dealt with inside the site plan. And so I would just like that somewhere to have an update, even where we're further along. that we know before, like, planning commission is set for final consideration or final site plan approval, that we're comfortable with that outcome in terms of making sure everything has been addressed appropriately for the city. Thanks.
Okay.
Anything else on schedule?
So I think that's it that I was going to walk through.
The Appointments Committee on the 12th of February. Letty, would you be available to come at 7:30 instead of 8 o'clock? We have a lot of interviews that evening.
Yes, I have a meeting at the schools, but I can probably leave early.
Okay.
What, February 12th?
February 12th. I'll let Veronica know that we could start at 7:30. She'll schedule some interviews early. That's good. And just reminding people to keep track of what the schools are doing on their budget. They had a work session last week, and there's a lot of Q&A on the website that probably many of you are taking a look at. So keep track of that as we get into our budget. And Mr. Shields, I had mentioned this to you before, and I checked it out again today. The traffic light if you're coming up Maple towards Broad, you go past Burke and Herbert, and you want to make a left onto Broad, that arrow, it does not work all the time.
Okay.
That left arrow is lately not working as well.
Okay.
It's the Andy intersection.
We've been having
that
struggles with the signal at that intersection.
Yeah.
So I did relay your comment, and
Okay.
so staff are aware of it, but I don't have a report back.
Okay. I thought it had been fixed, because I think but today I got stuck there again. And that's not really a scheduling thing, sorry.
It's also council comment things too. Any other items? Justine?
So we don't have a scheduling meeting this Wednesday, but we do have office hours.
at
so
9.
still- Okay.
Yep. For those who want to come.
Do we need a quorum for that?
Or ask the council.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you are, well, anytime you're gathered together to discuss city business, you're engaging in a meeting. And a meeting is, if it's advertised as a meeting of council and a quorum shows up, the meeting continues. If fewer than a quorum shows up, our practice has been not to engage in a discussion of public business without a quorum. But in the case of just answering questions that are coming, I don't know if we have a different practice that are coming from the public and not a discussion amongst each other. So I can say this, the council, any council member, no matter how many people are, well, it's a little dangerous in terms of a ramp, but any council member can engage in a discussion with a resident and you're not having a council meeting. But if 4 of you are engaging in a discussion with a resident about public business, you might be having a council meeting. So,
But if it's advertised already as a meeting of council, that's legal.
right, certainly no action can take place without the quorum. Our practice is no discussion either, because we've had this issue come up before, but my position has been you can discuss without a quorum.
Okay. Dave, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, thanks. I'd invite Cindy Mester, and I want to thank her for an incredible amount of work during this legislative session and as she has done prior sessions. And there's been a lot going on legislatively. I don't want to prolong the meeting tonight, but I think we should have a legislative committee meeting, and I think maybe Cindy has started to circulate some dates. Crossover, I think, occurs later this week. So I think we're going to need a discussion in the committee and then the general council as to whether there are things we really need to advocate strongly on, either to oppose or support. So I just invite Cindy to make a comment about the scheduling of that meeting and the next steps.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Yes, we'll schedule a legislative committee. Crossover is on Tuesday and tomorrow, and so we said we'd do it after that. The General Assembly's amendments to the governor's budgets were just posted yesterday, and we're waiting for the details for Tuesday. So I think it'll be next week, which I believe is when you're back in country, and then I'll work with the legislative committee on dates, and then we'll post it. There are some key bills that we will want to speak to, and then the budget amendments as well. So, but I need the rest of this week to kind of get through the details. But I'm appreciative of the council efforts last week when we down to Richmond, also on VTA days. So somewhere around here, there's some photos if you want to look at the Richmond trip as well as Eden Center. But thank you, Mr. Snyder. I'll circle back some dates.
Great, and thanks a lot. And I know too, through the committee, we want to start any discussions on federal developments that are relevant to our role as city council and consider those along with state developments. So thanks. Thanks very
Bring
much.
that to the Ledge Committee, and was a meeting today with Congressman Byer, and there's one with Warner tomorrow, so still a lot unknown, but they're trying to push through it. And I should also acknowledge thank you to council that came to the Legislative State Town Hall on Saturday with Senator Sleem and Delegate Simon. Pretty good turnout.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cindy.
Say thank you to Cindy for a good visit to Richmond, and also to planning staff and council members who made time for the ULI tap on Gordon Road, and the report out on that on Friday. I've lost track of time now. It was good. But on budget, I think obviously the freeze on federal funds that happened earlier in the week was really quite disruptive and alarming. And I know that over emails, we had asked staff to kind of start quantifying the impact. And while that is currently put on hold, I do think that impact assessment is worthwhile to do anyway. So I'm looking at Wyatt and Andy, that even though things are on hold, at least by the judge until whatever, later in February, that we should quantify both operating as well as potential capital impacts, as well as future federal funds that we may have been counting on. I know we had asked Congressman Byer to put in a couple of directed like earmarks for the city, but if those are at risk, I think we should start thinking about that now. And I don't think it's a necessarily out year thing. I'm actually pretty worried about FY26, that if there are things that are getting pulled, and I mentioned this at the beginning of our budget cycle, whether we should consider some sort of contingency fund and hold that aside. So should we have more information by May, maybe we don't need to use it, but I do think it would be prudent for us to think proactively about that rather than scramble mid-budget cycle. So, my opinion. Other opinions, welcome to. Okay. Final comments?
I just wanted to second Mr. Snyder's thanks of Ms. Mester. It was terrific as a brand new council member to see her in action, and just talk about someone who does their homework. She knew every bill that was important to every delegate and senator that we met with, and just really put Falls Church City on the forefront. Really advocated for our residents in our city. So thank you. It was a real pleasure to join you.
Great. Do we have a motion to adjourn then?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Already. Oh, yeah, we are in the middle of restaurant week until Sunday, February 9th. Go out and eat local.
Right on.
Thank you all. Good night. We're adjourned.
Good night. Thanks,
Thank you.
council.
I